Let's go. Let's go. It's it. We're live. It's Wednesday. Thanks, everybody. Let's get started. I'm not going to dilly-dally. Matthew Bush. In Matthew 18 and 19, it reads, "And a certain scribe came and said unto him, Master, I will follow thee whithersoever thou goest. And Jesus said to him, The foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath nowhere to lay his head." What was the inner meaning of this? Yeah, it's a weird thing to say to somebody. Hey, I'm going to follow you. I don't have anywhere to go to bed. Animals can go to bed places, but I don't have anywhere. Why would Jesus say that to this guy? So it's correspondential, like everything is, and it actually relates to the very first question we had last Wednesday. Remember, wasn't it the first one? When somebody said, why is Jesus called the Son of Man instead of the Son of God sometimes? So the name, God has infinite attributes, so God gets a lot of names to describe those different attributes. Whenever you hear God talked about as the Son of Man, it's about God's role as the Word. The Word is the sum total of divine truth, the function of which is to bring us into heaven, or as Swedenborg would put it, redeem and save us. Hey, Sherry. So when he's saying foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, he's talking about the receptivity that people have to the Word, or to God's outreach to them. So animals and birds correspond to affections and ideas. Animals' affections, birds' ideas. So the nests and the holes is like there's certain feelings that we're happy to house and bring inside of us. There's certain thoughts that we put up and let reproduce. But the state he's talking to here is a state where people don't have anywhere to put the Word. We'll take our own sort of pleasures and cravings, but there's nowhere to put these ideas. That he's talking about people who are not receptive to the Word. That's why he gives this strange answer to this guy. Brian says, why do you think Swedenborg remains obscure in the 21st century, even among people who are in the spiritual seeker mode, considering how famous he was in his day and for the following century? I think that the answer to the question I just gave is a pretty good example of why Swedenborg's not famous anymore. It's just complex, awkward stuff. It's cool when you get in there and understand what he's saying. I feel like it's blindingly cool, but so you're talking about the Bible, but there's an inner meaning to it, and there's foxes or your feelings. It's just not the kind of thing it's not simple pop spirituality that jumps off the page for people. I think it's too unorthodox for a lot of people who are committed to a certain kind of Christianity, like Lutheranism, and it's too biblical for people who are into broad pan spirituality. So it's just hard to have it hook people. I think it's just too many degrees of difficulty to get somebody to really give it a chance. Basically, people think or say, there's no way some guy who smells like complexity and Christianity and spirituality and seeing and talking to spirits and all this, there's no way he's got the answer. There's no way he's right. The branding is not good on it. That's what I think. John Bishop, if we think or push too much against what is wrong and unjust in the world, don't we just deprive ourselves of the ability to calibrate our vibrational energy to the very world we would like to see? You can certainly get overwhelmed with what's going wrong in the world, and we have access to so much more of what's going wrong in the world than we were ever built to or ever did before. You think about it, I can go on my phone, which is right there, and imbibe the tragedy that is proportional to billions of people. I can hear all around the world about everything bad that's happening, which normally I would just know what's going on in my village. So you can't, wouldn't say that there's a spiritual imperative or a moral imperative to think or push too much against what's wrong or unjust in the world. I think at some point you got to figure out what am I going to do that's useful? What am I going to do that's useful? And there's probably a limit to what you can get involved in and still be useful in it. The main way that you improve the world is in the functions that you're in. So in the job that you're in, the relationships you're in, do that honestly, justly, sincerely, and faithfully. Try to, how would the divine will I act in this particular instance? If everybody followed that program, we'd be all set. Okay, we got something. We got some more questions. Renee, right? I keep forgetting which one your name is. Renee. Hiya, Curtis. I just recently learned about Edgar Casey and found a lot of similarities with Swedenborg. Have you explored any of his work? Yes-ish. Not with any real depth. I've read a few of his things. I've had a lot of people recommend him. But no, I haven't. I guess I better get a little better read. Greg Tarr. Howdy. Sorry, I'm a newbie. Don't apologize. It's just fine. Wondering if you can say how the books of the Bible were written. Was this in the same way as Swedenborg's works? Different way. So the books of the Bible, well, I guess I have to preface that because according to Swedenborg, not every single book in what we call the modern Bible was written in the way I'm about to describe, but most of them were, which is the books in the Bible are the Word of God, which means they were directly inspired into people, into prophets who then wrote them down. And they are written in what Swedenborg would call pure correspondences. So, for example, what I was just saying about the foxes and the holes and the Son of Man and laying his head to rest, all those are symbolic or correspondential descriptions. So a fox is not really talking about a fox. A hole is not really talking about a hole. It's talking about things within the human spirit. Swedenborg's books aren't like that. Swedenborg books, if he's giving an example and he talks about a fox, he's just talking about a fox. So Swedenborg's books are not correspondential masterpieces like the Word is. I do think that, well, everything good and true comes out of God. So it has to be that if there's goodness and truth in Swedenborg's writings, that came out of God, but not in the same way as it came to the prophets. Swedenborg, it seems like Swedenborg was engaging differently, and you can just tell that the books are written differently. It's like an explanation or a guidebook or I don't know how you'd put it, but he does say that the modes of writing that are in the Bible are different than the ones that are in his books. Yaya says, did the Bible mention anything about the Hyksos, basically Canaanites that invaded Egypt? No, he doesn't. All peoples that are mentioned in the Bible have a correspondential symbolism. So it must have been that whatever happened with those people didn't have the symbolism that made it so that it would be useful for them to be included in the story. Question by the same person right after that said, why did God harden Pharaoh's heart if he doesn't interfere with free will? Right? Doesn't it seem like that's not really that free if God's hardening your heart? I just yelled at you, but yeah, God hardened my heart, so I had to do it. So 2 things about that. First of all, if we just look on the literal level of what's happening with Pharaoh, the Bible is written according to appearances. So when it says things like, God struck this person down, God sent an angel to destroy all of these people, God hardened Pharaoh's heart, that's written according to the appearance. God doesn't actually kill people, but when we're involved in evil, God's goodness seems terrifying and destructive to us. When we bring evil into our own lives, there's a tendency to blame God for it. And Swedenborg says that that made its way into how the stories were told. So if we were just taking it literally, it wouldn't be that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, but it's that the structure that the divine has created conditions in which when Pharaoh chose love of self and love of the world, it hardens his ability to receive what's good and true. But all that may be sort of a moot point because it's a correspondential story. So whatever happened with the actual people that were the basis for how the story was written down, we can be assured that there were no divine laws broken around free will. The telling of the story is all about conferring or conveying this spiritual process that happens inside each one of us. And Pharaoh symbolizes something that's inside of you. Egypt symbolizes essentially factual knowledge. The hardening of the heart symbolizes something. I have to go back and look at the particulars on that. I don't know. But it's all part of a symbolism. Okay. Pooh Man says, I've looked online and can't find the answer. Why is the Golden Age referred to as Saturnian? Man, I would think it's something to do with Saturn. Was that Greek or Roman god? I don't know. If you can't find it online, man, I don't know either. Sean Smith says that bishop guy is still rallying against Swedenborg's works. Who? Sean, who are you talking about? Somebody on YouTube knows about Swedenborg's works and is rallying against them? I got to know about this. Please post in the chat. Keith Curry says, can certain loved ones who have passed... Sorry, I got distracted by nothing. Can loved ones who have passed know when we are thinking about them? Thought brings presence on earth and heaven. I would think so. That's a universal spiritual law that what it takes for two spirits to get together is a mutual desire to see each other, and that whenever Swedenborg would think of someone, they were immediately present. People's spirits do exist in the spiritual world while their bodies are here. Swedenborg even says when we are deep in thought or meditation, we can actually be visible in our spiritual communities, but we just are sort of zoned out there because we're really tied to the earth still. So why wouldn't it be that when we think of our loved ones, it draws our spirit towards theirs? That's about it. I can give you the framework around it. Swedenborg doesn't describe that particular thing, but I would think so. Okay, Matthew, glad that was a good answer. DB says, do people's intentions matter more than their actions, even if the outcome turns out to be harmful toward others? How does the spirit world judge these situations? Yes. Your intentions matter more than your actions. There's a couple of striking examples Swedenborg gives. The two that I like to cite are that the same action, if 1,000 people do the same action, the exact same thing, to angels that can look 1,000 different ways spiritually, because each one of those actions is entirely different spiritually based on your intention. And in another place, Swedenborg makes the hyperbolic example that you could just, obviously he felt like the Christian church was important. He was trying to reform it. He said it had its flaws, but he recognized it generally as a force for good in the world. And he was saying that you could destroy the entire Christian church and persecute it off the face of the earth. But if you did that for a genuinely good motive, like you really thought that you were doing the right thing, it wouldn't be held against you spiritually. And you could do all kinds of things to promote it. You could give it tons of money. You could go and spread it throughout the world. But if you're doing that for a self-centered, materialistic purpose, then it wouldn't be seen as good spiritually. So your instincts are absolutely right on, DB. intention completely trumps action. Neil Wilson says, hello, Curtis. What are your views on reincarnation? I think I like Swedenborg's explanation, which is, and we did a show that I always like to reference it here because I'm going to give you an answer, which is that there's not reincarnation according to the general definition, which is that your consciousness returns to life in the world, on planet Earth, after you die and you live a new life in a new body. However, there's a lot. Do we reincarnate? Do we reincarnate is the name of the show that I'm going to post in here. There are a lot of things that are in the larger canon surrounding reincarnation that do happen. And there's some aspects of things that people describe happening on Earth with reincarnation that Swedenborg says do happen, but only in the spiritual world. So there's a episode we did called Do We Reincarnate? See if I can pull it up here and put it in the chat for you. If you're just watching afterwards, just search Do We Reincarnate? But I gave you the headline there. Copy paste. Copy paste, copy paste. Here we go. Paste it in the chat. Hello, Carl. Okay, so Deborah says, hi, last week you mentioned something about Swedenborg's beliefs being close to Buddhism or Mormonism. Can you explain that further? Sure. Luckily, I'm not an expert in either Buddhism or Mormonism, but I can give you some of the basics. I believe that the descriptions of the afterlife that are in Mormonism bear a lot of resemblance to Swedenborg's. And I actually don't know a lot of the other specifics around it. Dang. With Buddhism, I believe that when it gets down to Swedenborg's has his own brand of non-attachment. His idea that goodness comes from God, evil comes from hell, and that if we realize that and don't grab on to the evil and make it our own and don't steal credit for the goodness and make it self-serving, that brings us into a much more enlightened state. Swedenborg talks in his Journal of Spiritual Experiences a lot about being nothing, believing that on his own, without God's life, he's nothing, and that giving him actually quite a lot of spiritual advantages. Those, I believe, align with some of the deeper currents in Buddhism. Yahia says, the Bible says that 600,000 Israelite men escaped from Egypt with women, children, and cattle across the desert running from a couple of war chariots. How does that match with the population estimates of 2.5 million people in the New Kingdom of Egypt? So according to Swedenborg, everything in the Bible is correspondential. So this is not, the way things are written is not to be literally accurate to some historical events. Numbers, for example, you have people living to be 600 years old or more. That's not a biological reality. Those numbers are there intentionally because they correspond. So in the telling of the story, for 600,000 Israelites would have to be some kind of number that's got a meaning about completeness or about trial time. The number 6 is usually associated with times of trial, which I think is coming up in a question really soon. So whatever that number is there, it's telling you some meaning. The number that's popping in mind is we did this whole show about the 144,000, the people that get saved in the book of Revelation. There's 144,000. That doesn't mean that there's just like one mid-sized city of people getting saved, but 144 is 12 times 12. 12 corresponds to completeness. So 12 times 12 is all completeness. So it has to do with all people who are open to accepting what's good and true go to heaven. Something similar would be the case with that number. Mariola says, why can it be so difficult to open to God and to welcome/accept God's love? Does Swedenborg mention anything about that? Yeah, it is tough. And the reason is that we have an inner and an outer self. So you have an inner mind, an inner heart, like an inner part of your spirit, which is very closely connected with the Lord, and which is what you're drawing on when you get it and you let things in and you feel that connection. Our outer mind is built, or not built, but it currently, with the way the human race is, it starts in a state of being in opposition to God, that its life is actually turned backwards. What it feeds on and what it loves and what it believes and where it gets its information is the opposite of the life God is trying to bring us into. So God's life that's flowing into us is constantly working to rearrange and turn backward that part of the external mind, but that takes a long time. It has to be a gradual process. Just like if you are used to eating a certain way and you want to change your diet, it's very difficult. Usually you have to go slowly because otherwise you get withdrawal and whiplash or something like that. So complicated things have to change slowly, and the most complicated is our hearts and minds. So God is changing us, but He can't do it all at once just because of the nature of how complex and cool and special we all are. So it can feel like it's really hard to accept that love because there's that process. And also that, you get hurt in various ways. Your ability to receive love gets damaged by people doing mean things to you. And when that's damaged, it's harder to get in. There's a loss there, but it's not anything that God can't handle and not anything that won't be perfected by the time we're in the afterlife. And that's divine providence is constantly leading us to become more and more in this heavenly state that lets in God's love. But yeah, it can be tough in the meantime. Gabrielle says, what are spiritual trials and how do they work? Could my obesity, my schizophrenia, and me being a woman all be spiritual trials God and or my spirit are putting me through in reality? Spiritual trials are a part of spiritual growth where this is actually just relating to, whose question was it? Mariola, saying, why can it be so hard to accept God's love? Spiritual trials are the process by which we slowly get put into the place where we can accept God's love. So we have this stuff that's ours, all the negativity that's in us and all the falsity that's in us. There's some that's in there because it's our fault. There's others that's in there that's not our fault. And our outer mind clings to that. And in times of difficulty, times where we're struggling, that's when our ego-based mind loosens its grip on that stuff, and we're more open. We're shaken down. Our regular mode of life is disrupted, and I need help. And in those moments is when the inner self that is connected to God, it has a chance to move out from under the tyranny of the outer self and become where we think. When things go wrong, you start thinking about what really matters in life, and it pushes you into needing and working with higher concepts. Thank you, Gabrielle, for being willing to share what you're going through. How is you being a woman a spiritual trial? I want to hear more about that. But God and or my spirit are putting me through in reality. So I want to say that God is never putting us through something in that God says, I'm going to do this thing that's going to hurt you or that's going to be hard for you. All evil, all hurt doesn't come from God, but God will use hard circumstances to bring good out of them. And as far as like I know that everything that's in your life that's difficult is that good is coming out of it. It doesn't mean that that's the way God would have wanted. It's not that doesn't mean that that's what God wants for your life. It doesn't mean that God doesn't wish that we could do this in a way that's not painful or difficult. But because of the overall state of the world, sometimes that's how our lives go. It's a universal law, though, that anything that is allowed to happen, good is being brought out of. As far as the individual things, yeah, I know God is bringing good out of everything. Thank you for being willing to share what's going on in your life. I don't feel like I can say in particular, but nothing would be allowed unless in the end good is coming from it. Sean Smith, oh, you making a recommendation? Cool. Henry says, how can we cope with insomnia? Man, I've had a lot of insomnia in my life. Don't panic. So when it gets worse for me is when I'm waking up and I can't go back to sleep and I start to panic because I think, now I'm going to be super tired. And what if I can't sleep the next night? I'll actually say that the 23rd Psalm if I wake up and I'm getting nervous or like, am I getting some kind of health thing or something? Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Just to like calm down and just go back to sleep. So that's something. A lot of it, I think, yeah. So cope with insomnia. I remember like back. You guys remember when I was having my like health issues? Was it almost 2 years ago? Wow. On this channel, and I posted a video about how I was having acid reflux with GERD and all this crazy stuff. Well, with that, I was having sort of like mental breakdown and insomnia. Like I was really having a hard time sleeping. I just sleep in these little fits and spurts every night. And I remember really being stressed out about that because I was like, how am I going to survive on this? And how am I going to make videos and all this sort of stuff? So in that time, I remember I was just talking to my mom, Karen, who's on this channel, and she'd had a lot of insomnia, and she was just like, yeah, well, I've had these stretches where, yeah, I didn't get a lot of sleep, but I still survived. And that was comforting to me. And I just had to finally think, okay, well, divine providence is gonna get me through this state. So yeah, it might be that we can't sleep, but God's gonna get us through it. The next day, God will get you through. It's usually when I'm worried about insomnia, it feels like, oh, well, how am I going to do this thing tomorrow? I remember one last thing about this. So I was giving a talk in London, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. It was for this thing called the Conference for Consciousness and Human Evolution. And I'd never been to Europe before, and I'd never really given a talk at a big conference that I didn't know anyone at before. Oh, shoot. This was the second time. I did it twice. So the first time I did it was great. It was fun. Second time I was doing it, I was back in London, and I remember the night before my talk, I could not sleep at all. Because it was a 6-hour time difference. I'd done an overnight flight to get there, and I can't sleep on planes, and it was just a mess. And I could not sleep, and it was getting to be 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and my talk was next, and I remember being extremely distressed. How am I going to be on this stage, and I'm not going to be able to say anything, and 500 people are watching me, and finally I got to sleep somehow for a little while, and the talk was fine. I felt energized and perky, and God did it somehow. All right. Aaron Clark, off the left eye. I'm currently writing a script based on the Swedenborgian afterlife, but I'm having trouble with my action. Any idea how I can create action? Let me know what you do with your script. I've always thought all these, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Star Wars and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. You could make an amazing TV show or movie based in Swedenborg's afterlife. So let's think about it. How can we create action? The Swedenborg's afterlife is a lot more dynamic than you might think. Did you know that the whole second heaven was only created not that long ago? Did you know that at the time of the last judgment, so when Swedenborg was around, there was actually evil spirits had taken over the outermost layer of heaven? Did you know that at the time when Jesus came, there was so much evil in the spiritual world that the whole equilibrium that allows for consciousness was going to be destroyed? That's why Jesus had to come and battle and reassemble everything in hell. Did you know that there's just a lot of action going on? It's, I guess, the thing that could thwart action is you think, well, it's just heaven, it's there and it's invincible, and then there's action all the time. And in hell, there's constantly plots and powerful leaders emerging, and them trying to lead assaults on heaven and trying to attack the world of spirits where people are coming in, and angels have to go and intervene. There is things at stake, and there is quests to be quested. Okay. What we got? What are we talking about here? Hemal, Hemal, says, any more guidance on positive and negative forces, please? Are you talking about like heaven and hell, forces that are at play on us? All your negative thoughts, all your false thoughts. A lot of false thoughts. I don't know if the falsities that are not from evil would be applied to, but pretty much all your false negative thoughts are coming in from hell, and all of your good and true thoughts are coming in from heaven. Same thing with feelings. We are part of this huge consciousness network, and what place we can get to is where when we feel something positive come in, we can say, "That's great, that's from heaven, and I'm going to act on this and believe it." When we feel something from hell coming in, we can say, "That's from hell. Why would I want that?" And that can save us from the grip those things usually have on us. Tim Wood, can we recreate stuff in heaven that we had on earth? For instance, you had a nice car on earth and you decide you want to have it in heaven too. Yeah. What if you have a really great car? Stuff can be recreated from our memory. Swedenborg talks about people who had written books, and those books were reproduced out of their memory in the spiritual world. Everything that's ever been in your life is in your spiritual memory. I don't know how at will that creation is, and I don't know if it lasts, but in principle, it should be that you can recreate what you had on earth. My sense is probably there's cooler stuff in heaven. It seems like everything that you had on earth, there's a corresponding bigger, better thing in heaven, but it could be if you really got this car that you love. I bet there's ways. Shelley says, what does Swedenborg say about using our birth names in heaven? Do we use our names, or is it not necessary? You don't keep your birth name. Like I won't be Curtis in the afterlife, because there is a particular name that exactly is the embodiment of your qualities. So every word of spiritual language is an actual embodiment of the pure idea. So right now, if I want to say mug, yeah, I was looking at a mug. This is a thing, right? This is a particular thing. Everybody knows what a mug is. It's a reality. But in English, the language I'm speaking, we had to say, all right, well, we know what this thing is. You can picture it in your mind. Let's put a word to it. Mug. It's a different word in every language. Okay. That's what this thing is. But spiritually, the idea itself, like picture a mug in your mind, the idea of the thing itself can be expressed verbally. So you can express the pure idea. Somehow there can be sounds that are the pure idea of this. Same thing with you. There is a word that is the exact embodiment of your soul, and that's what people call you, because that's what you are. Tenacious TITC says, can you tell me the difference between consciousness and the soul, or are they separate? Consciousness is, your spirit is your consciousness. It's not different. You have, your consciousness is housed in a spiritual body, just like right now it's housed in a natural body. So you have, Swedenborg talks about your spirit body being like this, like it's a thing, it's an object. Your will and understanding are parts of that. So your thoughts and your consciousness emerges from the structure of that spiritual body. Is that clear? Okay. Sherry says, is it true that we can do the same things in heaven that we do here, like sex and so on? Yes. Swedenborg talks about couples having sex, and that's like here, but like better. And everything else, like walking and talking, and what else do people do? Dancing, singing. Like there's remarkable similarity there. Aha. Kronos is Greek, Saturn is Roman. Hey, come on now. What's going on here? Wait a minute. Give me a second. Okay. Sorry, I got bumped way down, and I don't want to miss any of these questions. Where were we? Okay. Can spirits think about other spirits but lack the desire to meet them? Yaya said that. Yaya. Yep. Absolutely. That a mutual aversion pushes people very far away. So you have to think about somebody with a desire to meet. That's what triggers the presence. Oh, that's what you're talking about, Sean. Remember, there was a bishop that, while alive, was stifling the distribution of Swedenborg's works. Yes, from the podcast. Poohman says, is reflection understanding? So Swedenborg will use understanding. Well, in some translations, his word understanding is a term for what is also translated as the intellect. It's like our faculty of cognating about stuff. Reflection is a particular action that means a lot, like we think about it now. It's it's using your higher mind to examine the character and quality of your lower mind. So it's being able to assess, not through the lens of, it's me, so I'm special, but is this good or not? And you can actually enlist other people to help you in that reflection. When we die and are in heaven, is our consciousness thinking, or is thinking connected to the body, or acting as is, if that makes sense? So you can't think outside of a structure. There's no such thing as thought apart from the forms that cause thought. So just like the brain's forms have an effect on your conscious experience here, which would be according to Swedenborg because they affect its interaction with the consciousness that's our soul. The consciousness within our soul, like thoughts and feelings, is the firing and structure of the spiritual substance of the brain. So yes, there's no thinking apart from being in a body, even if it's a spiritual body. Mr. Hasba says, is resurrection possible even by Swedenborg's view? What do you mean by resurrection? Would that be like the bodies of people who have died here coming back and being animated again by their spirits? No, according to him. He says it did happen in the case of Jesus Christ, that was God's resurrection and was so complete that you actually did have his physical body turned spiritual, which was like a singularity. Question from Kathy V. That saying, "From dust we came, to dust we'll return," what is its actual meaning? I had thought about how if you leave things be, they get dusty. Oh man, I don't want to speculate. I don't know. I have to look that up because it's probably a very particular meaning. Sorry, I don't have that. Cool Smile says, what does Swedenborg say about masturbation? Man, I don't think, I mean, he makes a few offhanded references to it. I think it was called abuse or misuse back in the day when he was writing. He doesn't have a lot to say about it. So I don't know. Power Lady 1, can our loved ones who have died be in more than one place? If multiple people are thinking about them at once, can they visit all of them? Following up on a prior question. Thanks. I don't think so. I think that's spiritual time is not really like time here. It's not with fixed intervals. So I wonder if it would be, even if it seemed like, I'm thinking about you at the same time, there's actual, really, the next person doesn't think of them until the first person's finished. I wonder about that. I wonder about that in context of God too. Because sometimes I feel bothered by the idea that I never really have God's full attention. You know? The rest of the billions of you are taking some of it right now. So it's childish, but it's like, I want just being you for a second. Like, think about me. Like, if you're my parent, just think about me right now. But I wonder if, because God's in all time, it's almost like God can, in a moment, just be thinking about you. Because God has an infinite amount of time to work with, and can be it's not that it's simultaneous. It's like, right now I'm just thinking about you, and I'm just thinking about you, something like that. Yaya says, how do you explain the Bible's logical contradictions? The Bible's not a document of logic. It's a correspondential description. So the inner sense, the spiritual processes that it's describing, those are logical and rational. But the outer sense, Swedenborg would 100% agree with you. It can be quite illogical. It can be quite confusing. That's because it's just a covering for the inner story. And Diswa says, do we bathe in the afterlife? I hope we do. Yes, we have to. There's washing and cleaning. I don't know if he ever mentions it, but there's the correspondence of removal of evil. So I'm sure that you're bathing. Or does he ever mention that? I love the bath. I love showers. Like, we better do it there. Tim Wood says, why do Christians believe that any other religion other than Christianity are that of the devil? I don't know, because there's a lot of Christian people have inaccurate doctrines. There's a lot of falsities in Christianity. This was one of the main things that Swedenborg was pushing back against. He didn't think that, actually, it's the opposite. All religions are from God. All religions that encourage behaviors along the lines of the Ten Commandments and believe in some kind of divine being, those are all pathways to heaven. And the Lord is in all those things. I think that you'll have people saying other religions and Christianity are that of the devil because the theology says, well, you have to be Christian to get saved. So how do these other things pop up? But that's not true. You don't have to. What religion you're part of doesn't matter. Remember back when we were thinking way back at the beginning about is your intention or the action? Is that which one of those matters? It's the intention that matters. So your action of subscribing to a particular religion, that's not what matters. It's why are you doing it? And what's your inner life like when you're doing it? So you could have somebody who's Christian and yet is living against the Ten Commandments and is mean and nasty and living completely against Jesus's teachings. And you can have somebody who's in a non-Christian religion who is living by the code of love your God and love your neighbor. That person is more spiritually in tune with what's really going on. Okay, post-nap coffee says, can we interpret some physiological processes that occur when we pray, heart palpitations, calmness, a feeling in our nerves or pain in our chests, as reflections of spiritual work occurring within us? I think so. To Swedenborg, the different parts of the body and spirituality were absolutely intertwined. All the different societies of heaven act on your body in different ways. Heaven itself is like the human form and corresponds to every bit of it. So I would absolutely think that you can feel good things happen. Your spirit is connected to not just a part like in your head, it's connected to every part of your body. So I would absolutely think that good things happening in your spirit could show up in your body. Yaya says, how does God react to people who aren't inherently evil but they are selfish and God resenting? Maybe the inwardly good, but outwardly they have a dark shell of sorts. I think God reacts to everybody with love and the constant desire to make life better and better for them and to lead them into deeper and deeper happiness. Doesn't matter if you were totally evil, like you intentionally went and enjoyed doing everything that's terrible, God would react in the same way with seeing that really, you somehow got led down the wrong path, that hell has gotten into you and made you do this, that there could be an innocent core, there is an innocent core to you that God is trying to pull out. So that's how God reacts to everybody. People who have, they're good essentially, but they have a sort of a dark shell. I mean, if providence can't lead you out of that while you're in the world, that's what the world of spirits is for. So the world of spirits is a place that you go right after you die, and it is where what's in your inner comes to be what's in your outer as well. So if you have a good heart and genuinely believe and in the end would act on the golden rule and are not adamantly confirmed against the idea of a God, if the right description was given to you, then through some experiences, maybe some sort of spiritual trials, like we discussed earlier in the show, you would get to a point where what's deep in your heart becomes what's on the outside as well. Christina says, this is interesting. Thanks. I'm so glad you like this conversation. I'm interested. Oh man, so interested that it's past time and I didn't even realize. Whatever, we'll do a couple extra minutes. What else are we going to do? Not evil loving, in other words. So this is this is an extension of that previous question. Not evil loving, in other words, which means they have separatist tendencies. What if they dislike both hell and God? You probably don't dislike both hell and God. Maybe the idea of God. But hell is the pleasure that you get in doing things that are harmful to people. Heaven is the pleasure that you get in doing things that are good and helpful. You probably don't, everybody likes one of those two. There is like love of the world, which is just sensory gratification. But I would think, well, people might have some negative experience with the idea of God and not like that. I think you can't help loving either heaven or hell, I think. But, yeah, I think God's not going to be offended if you feel like you don't like. I don't think that heaven is not the same for anybody. So everyone's particular heaven is the state that they would come into when they live their life based on mutual love. So it could look very different for some people. Some people probably are off by themselves. Some people are in the middle of a crowded city, But heaven is the state of your particular mind and heart when your life is run by mutual love and the acknowledgement that love itself comes from God, from a source outside of us. Renee says, my husband passed over 2 years ago now. I miss him terribly. I ask God all the time, does Swedenborg say anything about our lost loved ones? I'm sorry for your loss. That's the toughest thing that you can go through. And your lost husband is healthy and young and growing in love and wisdom right now, and will be waiting for you. As Swedenborg talks about the spirits of married couples, the one who's died dwelling with the one who has not yet died. And that bond of love that you feel with your husband can continue in the afterlife and can actually grow stronger and deeper forever. Forever. William Boyd says, being a Mormon myself, remember before I didn't know anything about what to say about Mormons. William's going to say something. Swedenborg taught many concepts that match our beliefs. Our temple ceremony teaches that all truth can be circumscribed into one great whole. There you go. I knew there was similarities. Emma says, I just joined the chat. I'm a longtime listener. Your channel changed the way I interact with everyone. I now love to help after hearing what Swedenborg said about angelic motivation to help. Hey, man, that's why we're doing what we're doing. What's the net impact? It's that you love to help. That's not, who's going to complain about that? Cool, Emma. Thanks for being here. Okay. Tim Wood said, what if all evil and negativity was wiped off the face of the earth? You can't do it because the evil and negativity is in people, and you can't wipe people off the face of the earth because they need the earth. They need the chance to reform. That's why evil is allowed, is because when it's seen and experienced, we have the chance to reject it. The people who are committing it, as well as those of us who suffer it, and then can reject that in ourselves. So it's got to be. All right, let's just do a couple more since we're past the time. Yeah, well, there's too many there's too many for me to get to this time. Thanks everybody. Really appreciate. Okay, fine. I'll do a couple more. So because Sherry said, I don't want to be with my husband in the afterlife. Is that good? Because you don't have to be with your husband in the afterlife. The thing that brings people together and keeps them together is real love. It's not the bond of were we married or not married. Swedenborg talks about people who had multiple, had married someone and then that person died and they married somebody else and had multiple spouses throughout their life. They go into the afterlife and spend time with each one. And when you're in that spiritual state, you can tell, we're not right for each other. We don't actually have that compatibility. So, but if you do have that compatibility, then you stay together. So you getting married here is not a spiritual thing. It can be a really important ceremony and thing to build a foundation on your life here. But in the spiritual world, spiritual marriage only happens when there's a real bond of love there. Yeah. What else? What great comments everybody has. Okay. Cool. Last one. Did Swedenborg ever say why he was chosen to experience the afterlife? This is from Aaron. Yes. It was because of his education. It was because he was as smart as he was and he was as versed in all the sciences and things as he was. He had a mind that was prepared to be able to understand and faithfully reproduce and catalog what he was shown. So he said that his life previously had prepared him for that. So God, through providence, was trying to get someone into a state where he would be ready to accept, understand, and then write the things. So it was just that he had the right mental tools. Cool. All right. Fine. ON says, should we just all die? No. The earth this is where we're doing essential spiritual work. Like the nature of the physical world is such that we can do spiritual work here that you can't do in the spiritual world or in the afterlife, because here you can have an external and an internal self. So you can have negative things in your outer self, but you can look at them from your internal self and say, oh, I don't want to do that anymore, and then slowly change yourself. In the spiritual world, you can't really do that because what you're like inside and outside become the same. So we don't want to skip the world. The world is tough, but it's really important for building a foundation for our spirits. And if everybody on earth died, heaven would be destroyed. It couldn't function without, there's an intimate connection between people on earth and spirits and angels, and they need each other to survive. So we got to be here. Doesn't mean we can't clean up this world. Doesn't mean we can't make it a lot better. That is what we're trying to do. But it's got to be here. And yeah, it's not that great right now a lot of the time, but it can get great, and we can make it great, and that's part of what we're trying to do, getting these ideas into each other's heads and living by them. So cool. Thank you, everybody. Just Gene, glad that you felt like this gave you some spiritual water. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out. If you're watching in post, get your questions in. If any of you are, I didn't get your question, write it in the chat. Oh, before you go, man, this is super important. Do you want to hang out in real life? Do you want to do what we're doing here? But over the weekend, like in the same room, we have the Off the Left Eye experience coming up. Are you registered for it yet? This is there's going to be a weekend where the whole Off the Left Eye team is hanging out. I'll post a link in the chat. We've never done this before, where we get to bring all of you here and we get to meet. So check that out. Register for that. It's in June. You get to come and see our studio and be here, and I want to meet you all in person. So let's do that. Okay. Just go to offtheLeftEye.com and you'll see a link to sign up for that Off the Left Eye experience. See ya. Let me click on my little window that's like end stream. Goodbye, everybody.